Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. I think we'll get started. There's a few more people trickling in, but we're after 11 here, so why don't we get going? So we're talking about EWRB today, the Energy and Water Reporting and Benchmarking Regulation. This is actually going to be a joint presentation between Hydro Ottawa and our friends over at the City of Ottawa. The City of Ottawa will present after our piece to tell us about their Better Buildings program, which is also focusing on benchmarking energy use in commercial buildings. So we're lucky to have Aaron from the City of Ottawa here joining us today. Right off the bat, so certainly we want to make sure we have time for questions afterwards, and we welcome your questions. The best way to do that is actually to submit your question in writing through the question box that you should see on your GoToWebinar controls. We'll probably wait till the end to take those questions, and my colleague Sarah's on the line to have a look at what those questions are, and we'll read that on EWRB. Today we're going to talk about what it is, who has to report, how do you report, all the nuances. Hopefully you'll know everything that you could possibly hope to know about EWRB by the time we're done today. So EWRB is a Government of Ontario regulation. It requires reporting of a certain subset of buildings. The building owners have to report their energy and water consumption to the province using Energy Star's portfolio manager. This is a permanent regulation, so it's not a one-time thing. It is an annual reporting requirement. So every year, if you're an eligible building, you have to report each year. And again, it's basic building data. So energy and water consumption, as well as building size, that gets put into Energy Star's portfolio manager. In your second year of reporting, the results will start to be published. It's anonymized at the moment, so the published data can't be matched back to an address. That may change in the future, but at the moment, it's through an anonymous registry, searchable by an EWRB number, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the reporting has been phased in over the last number of years. It started with the largest buildings. Currently, buildings that are 100,000 square feet and up are required to report this year. And each year that you're reporting the previous calendar year's data. So the 2021 reporting year, actually we're in 2022 now, the 2022 reporting year is reporting January to December of 2021. Next year in 2023, the threshold for reporting drops down to 50,000 square feet and up. So buildings 50,000 square feet and up will be required to report. It's a mandatory reporting. And at the moment, that's where the threshold is set to stay. So that being said, we are also encouraging other buildings to report. So through the City of Ottawa's Better Buildings program, the City of Ottawa is asking buildings 20,000 square feet and up to consider reporting and looking at their data and benchmarking it as a way to target energy savings and conservation. And so you can request data if you're 20,000 square feet and up. There are some exemptions. So federally and provincially owned buildings do not need to report through this mechanism. And that's because they're already reporting through different programs, either to the federal government or to the provincial government. If a building has more than 50% of their space occupied by a public agency, so if the federal government or the provincial government is leasing space in your building, more than half that space, you can get an exemption. If more than 10% of the floor area is occupied by a data center, a TV studio, or a trading floor, there's an exemption. Or for certain manufacturing, commercial agriculture processes that have specific environmental conditions. So an example here would be a refrigerated warehouse. There are some environmental requirements for that space, and so there's an exemption for those buildings. If you think your building qualifies for an exemption, you have to reach out to the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines to ask for that exemption. And then they won't be looking for your data through the reporting. So in order to report, you need to have an EWRB ID number. This is issued from the Ontario Ministry of Energy. You may have already gotten one. So if you've reported in previous years, you would already have one. The Ministry of Energy does send them out to everybody they think is eligible for reporting. If you haven't received one or you don't know where it is, you can reach out to the ministry and ask for them to provide you with that EWRB number. And I think we'll put the contact information up on the screen after. So you'll need your EWRB number. You'll need your gross floor area. So you'll need to know how big your building is. And this includes all conditioned spaces. So your lobby, your stairwells, your loading dock, your mechanical penthouse, anything that's heated or cooled would go into that calculation. And then you need your monthly utility consumption. So your energy and water is reported on a monthly basis. You just need one total number per month. And that's for whole building consumption. So that includes any tenants that you might have, even if you are not responsible for their electricity or gas or water account, you do have to include their consumption in your reporting. And we'll talk about ways to do that. So you can get this information obviously either from bills if you control all the accounts, or if you don't, you can request it directly from the respective utility or from the city if it's water data. The reporting mechanism is Energy Star's Portfolio Manager tool. So this is an online portal that you input your data, and it's a benchmarking tool. It was originally created in the United States by the US EPA. It was modified for the Canadian context by NRCan, Natural Resources Canada. It's a pretty straightforward tool to use. You build your building profile and then add your utility data. And it's not just a reporting mechanism, it actually gives you some insight into your energy use intensity of your building. It benchmarks your building against other similar buildings and really is a useful tool. So it's something that you can get some value out of as well, not just a reporting mechanism. Yeah, so like I said, Portfolio Manager is pretty straightforward. You have to create an account. It's free to create an account. You have to build your building profile. So you add a building and you put in the characteristics of your building, how big it is, what your hours of operation are, how many people are typically in the building. And the more accurate you are with that data, the more useful the tool is for you. So you can put in very general generic numbers, but you won't get as much value out of it. If you can really dial in and put your exact square footage, enter different space types. So there's the option to put in, office space versus retail space versus, loading dock space. If you break it out, you'll get more value out of that because it's able to refine the benchmarking a little bit more. So, I'd encourage you to spend the time you need to with that tool in order to really get in some accurate information. And like I said, it's a free tool and there is a lot of value in it. So, don't think of this as just a reporting exercise. Think of it as an opportunity to get some insight into your building and benchmark yourself against similar buildings. Once you get all your data in, including your utility data, you can share your profile with the Ministry of Energy. And the Ministry of Energy does have some guidance on specifically how to do that. And then that's the only reporting that you have to do. They then have access to that profile and put that in their records. So like I said, buildings over 100,000 square feet have to report this year. Eventually that threshold's going to drop, but the 100,000 square feet is still an important number because buildings that are over 100,000 square feet have to have their data verified in the first year that they report and every 5 years after that. So if you've never reported before and your building's over 100,000 square feet, the regulation requires that you have the data verified. And there are a number of different ways you can have that data verified. So somebody with one of the credentials that you can see on your screen there can perform the verification for you. And it's just going through and checking that all the numbers make sense and everything is entered correctly. This can be an in-house staff member or it can be a third-party professional. So you can engage a consultant to support you in meeting these requirements. And again, somebody with one of the following sets of credentials can do that verification for you. So a couple notes that I think are worth mentioning here. The size requirements are for individual buildings, not for combined gross floor area of a property. And so the best example of this would be, a plaza or an outdoor mall that has a number of different buildings which are all associated with each other, which would add up to 100,000 square feet. but the criteria is for the individual building level. So you don't need to add those buildings together in order to hit that threshold. If your individual buildings are under the threshold, you don't need to report. Building owners can choose, however, whether to report at the individual building or the property level. So in some cases, it might be easier or more straightforward to report at the property level. Maybe your utilities are combined and you just have one bulk bill, or your records are combined and it's easier to report at the complex level. Or if you prefer to split them up, that's okay too. If the ministry has only sent you one EWRB number for connected buildings and you would prefer to report separately, you can request additional EWRB numbers from the ministry. So you can reach out to them and ask them for those additional numbers. There is no exception for high vacancy rate. So let's say, for whatever reason, your building is sitting with a high vacancy rate, you still have to report. The great thing about the Portfolio Manager tool is that it actually takes into account your vacancy. So you have the opportunity to put in what your occupancy rate is, and it will factor that into its benchmarking calculation. Obviously, it'll take that into account. I've put a few resources up there on the screen that you can see. So the Ministry of Energy has a dedicated EWRB webpage. It has the text of the regulation. It's got some guidance for you. And really, it's worth taking a look at if you have any questions. And then Energy Star Portfolio Manager's website is there as well. I find that the help documents on the Energy Star Portfolio Manager website are quite detailed and quite helpful. So if you're having questions or issues with the Energy Star tool, certainly make use of those documents to support your submission. So in terms of getting your data, how do you get your data? Like I said, if you are the account holder for that data, and most of this is going to be in the Hydro Ottawa context, obviously I can speak a little bit to Enbridge's process, and Aaron's here from the city as well. But for Hydro Ottawa, if you're the account holder, let's say you have a single account for the entire building, it's really straightforward to get that data. You can either get it from your bills, because you would get monthly consumption on your bills, or you can log into your My Account profile on the Hydro Ottawa website, and there's an easy download data aspect under the usage tab. So you click on usage, you can export your data into an Excel spreadsheet, and it'll all be there. Obviously, though, there are many cases where the building owner, or the one who's required to report, may not be the account holder for all of the accounts in the building. So if you think about in multi-use residential buildings, all the tenant accounts, or in office buildings that might have some retail tenants, you may not be the account holder for that, so you can't get that data from Hydro Ottawa. You could go around to all those tenants and ask them for their data, but that's tedious and you may not get them to agree. So we've created a process at Hydro Ottawa where you can request whole building aggregated data from Hydro Ottawa, and we'll give you your total building consumption. And you can see the link there on the screen, hydroottawa.com/EWRB. We have an online form. You complete that form and we'll process that request for you. So this is a screenshot of the form, and like I said, we only provide that data in aggregate form. This is to protect our customers' privacy. So we're not going to break out each individual account and show you individual account information. That's private information. What we do is we aggregate all that data together. You get a single consumption number for each month, and that's your whole building consumption. We don't require any specific consent forms because we are aggregating that. We are protecting our customers' privacy. So it's a pretty straightforward process. We do ask for some specific information in the form in order to demonstrate that whoever's requesting the data does have the authorization of the building owner to request that data. So, we don't want consultants asking for data if they haven't been approved by the building owner. So we ask for some, unique identifiers, an account number that's in the building, the EWRB number. That lets us know that whoever is asking for this data has been authorized by the building owner to request that data. So keep an eye out for what the mandatory fields are and make sure that those are completed. The required fields, as I mentioned, are the EWRB number, at least one account number. The more you give us, the better. But even if you don't know all the account numbers because they're not your accounts, put in as much as you can, and we can do the rest. And this is a real critical piece, all possible civic addresses. So, your building may sit on a corner and actually have more than one civic address, or it may be a series of buildings all connected that have different civic addresses. At Hydro Ottawa, every account has a service address that may or may not be the main address of the building. So we ask that you give us all possible addresses of the building, and we will look up all the accounts at those addresses to make sure that we cover your total building consumption and that nothing gets missed. We may reach back out to you if you submit a form and it looks like it's a complex building or it's on a corner and we have questions. We may reach out to you to clarify exactly which properties you're asking for, and then we can process the request and again make sure we don't miss anything. You do have the ability on the form. We know that many of you on the call might manage portfolios of buildings, or you may be a consultant that's been engaged to report on a number of buildings. Excuse me, you can request more than one building in a given form. We have the option to add additional requests in. So once you submit the form, the requester will receive a confirmation email showing what the information is that you've asked for. Like I said, we may follow up to clarify some things with you. And then up to 6 weeks later, we will provide you with the requested data. 6 weeks is the outside limit of what we will take to get back to you. We do our best to do it a lot sooner than that, but especially when the requests pile up, it can take up to 6 weeks to give that information. We will also send those same emails to the property owner. So if you're a consultant working for an owner and you're requesting the data, we will copy the property owner just so that they also have that information and they're aware that this is happening. So for gas data, Enbridge also has a fairly easy to follow process that you can request data from Enbridge. The URL is up on the screen there. It's a very similar process to us. It's an online form. You have to submit some required data, and then they will get back to you with total building consumption for gas. And the City of Ottawa. So water in the City of Ottawa is managed by the city. You can log into your My Service Ottawa at ottawa.ca and access your consumption there. But if you are not the account owner or there's more than one account, then you can email EWRB at ottawa.ca and do a manual request for data through that mechanism. Okay, so a couple thoughts on reducing consumption. Obviously, the whole purpose of this is to get people thinking about their energy consumption in their buildings, understanding how your building performs compared to others, and maybe setting some goals and targets for reducing your consumption. So tracking consumption is a great first step. Understanding what you use is critical in order to tackle any reductions. So establishing a baseline and being able to set goals and track progress against that. Maybe you want to reduce by 5% a year or 10% a year. Maybe you want to set some more ambitious targets. Understanding where you are is a critical first step. Once you have your consumption tracked, you can look for trends or anomalies. Maybe you have a normal load profile of your consumption in your building on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, and then you notice, a spike somewhere where there shouldn't be a spike or where there normally isn't. That will let you investigate what's going on. Maybe there's a piece of equipment that failed and was stuck on and should have turned off. And you'll notice those things if you're tracking your consumption and watching your load profile. There are also programs out there to help you to provide incentives for replacing old and inefficient equipment with new efficient equipment. So Save on Energy is the provincial program that's run through the IESO, the Independent Electricity System Operator, and you can see all their programs at saveonenergy.ca. I'd also encourage you to reach out to Hydro Ottawa. So we have a conservation team here at Hydro Ottawa, and we do provide support to building owners and managers to identify opportunities for savings, identify opportunities for reduction of consumption, and we'd be happy to have someone come out and chat with you about what your energy goals are. Okay, so that's it for me. I think if I keep scrolling here, we'll hit Aaron's presentation. There we go.
Thanks, Trevor. And thanks, folks, for tuning into this session this morning. I'm going to be picking up sort of right where Trevor left off, speaking about energy conservation and the role of the Better Buildings Ottawa program and specifically the benchmarking program within the context of energy conservation and energy efficiency retrofits. So just going to make sure I have control here. Oops. I'm not sure if this is me or it looks like it's following around. Okay, I'll just use the arrow keys. Great, there we go. So just an overview of what we'll be talking about today, introducing the Better Buildings Ottawa strategy approved by council late last year, and then talking about the Better Buildings benchmarking and auditing program and a little bit more about why it's worth your while. So for folks who may have been following, various aspects of the climate change, master plan through City Hall, might be familiar with the Better Buildings Ottawa strategy. But ultimately, this is the commercial building retrofit accelerator of the City of Ottawa for the private sector. So as folks may know, the City of Ottawa has really been ramping up its climate change targets and planning in the past few years. And now we're looking at how can the city play an incentivizing a catalytic role in deep energy retrofits within the commercial building sector, spanning everything from commercial office properties, mixed use, all the way to multi-unit residential, industrial, as well as institutional. So this program, this strategy looks at the ways in which the city can accelerate the rate of adoption of deep energy retrofits within the commercial and large residential sector. So speaking a little bit about the timelines and reduction targets that the city has laid out, and this is all in line with detailed energy modeling that gets us to a greenhouse gas reduction threshold in line with the Paris Accord, with the targets set out by the scientific community worldwide. So essentially a target of 100% or net zero emissions by 2050. So as you can see, we've got a lot of work to do between now and 2025 based on where we are today and where we need to get to within the next 3 years. It's a fairly healthy target. Now this is across all buildings and all aspects of the community. So everything aside from what the City of Ottawa manages itself. So this is not just looking at commercial and the ICI building sector, but also looking at transportation and waste. And obviously you can see transportation and buildings take up the lion's share of these, where emissions are coming from today. Again, just another sort of representation of what you just saw, but this is essentially showing where these reductions are going to come from. So again, I'd point to transportation and existing buildings, in particular existing buildings for the audience that is on the call today. Roughly 30% of emissions reductions need to come from existing buildings. So when we talk about where those emissions are coming from and where we can make improvements, it looks a little bit something like this. On the left-hand side, you have the greenhouse gas emissions based on the fuel type. So as you can see, that blue bar making up the lion's share, which is respective to natural gas. And on the right-hand side, you've got the emissions based on end use. So again, space heating, not a surprise because it's primarily powered or fueled by natural gas here in the City of Ottawa. And those two large bars are corresponding to small residential, so single family homes and things of that nature, and then large residential, as well as commercial, institutional, and industrial buildings as well. So those are the areas we need to get to. And so this Better Building strategy outlines a way to do that. And as Trevor says, it starts with benchmarking. It starts with recording, energy consumption and associated greenhouse gas emissions in the buildings that we use today. From there, we're looking to build onto that with various education, various training programs, different kinds of economic tools to incentivize, which I'll speak a bit to later. And ultimately, we are working our way here in the city towards outlining disclosure regulations, as well as potentially regulated energy performance standards, as we've seen in certain other jurisdictions, such as Toronto, Vancouver, New York State, where they're introducing timelines 2025, 2030, by which point building owners must, and their buildings must reach a certain energy performance threshold, established with the help of establishing a benchmarking program. And of course, as we're doing all of this, the City of Ottawa is concerting efforts towards engaging with provincial, with federal levels of government, because we know we can't do this alone. Just to break down those project milestones a little bit and timelines for folks, you can see that a large portion of this work focuses on shifting buildings away from use of natural gas and other fossil fuels towards electric sources, primarily for space heating and for water heating, as that's where the bulk of natural gas use is tied to today. These are some rough guidelines that were drawn out from our energy modeling experience that was done over the last 4 or 5 years. And so you can see that, fairly aggressive targets. We're talking about, over a quarter of large buildings, large commercial and industrial and institutional buildings being retrofitted at a fairly deep level by 2030 and ramping up from there on. So a little bit about where we start with this, and of course that's benchmarking and auditing. If we don't establish, a concerted, sort of defined baseline, it's really hard to measure success, but it's also really hard to establish what targets might need to be set in order to motivate action in this sector. So this is where we're starting with the benchmarking and auditing program. As Trevor alluded to, this is a little bit of a sort of running in tandem to EWRB. And I'll speak certainly to the sort of reasons why our program is a little bit different or maybe adds on to the EWRB program. Already mentioned is, of course, the lower participation threshold of 20,000 square feet rather than where we are today at 100,000 square feet. Really important that I stress that this is a voluntary program. So this is not a City of Ottawa regulated program. We are hoping that the province may, accelerate its reporting timelines to incorporate more property owners, more properties into the, sort of required benchmarking through EWRB. But as it stands right now, this City of Ottawa program is voluntary and owner initiated. One of the other major differences between our program and the EWRB program is that it does involve public disclosure of energy performance at the building level. So as Trevor mentioned, within the EWRB, this is focused primarily on, sort of disclosure and aggregate of energy performance across the province, across certain, postal code areas, for instance. Our aim is to disclose at the building level, as this has been something that's been seen over a number of different jurisdictions to be really an effective tool to motivate action to actually take use of the benchmarking findings and put them into action with energy efficiency retrofits. So this is a snapshot about how we're going to be looking at this in year one. This is the first year of the City of Ottawa's benchmarking program. But given the, what we've all been through over the last few years, we want to make sure we're establishing accurate baselines. Of course, during COVID, especially in the commercial building sector, a lot of these buildings were, very much underutilized or underoccupied relative to their sort of normal, usage rates. So we are looking to go back all the way to January 2019 and collect monthly energy data between January 2019 and December of 2021 to really establish a fulsome picture of energy consumption patterns for certain buildings over that time period, and especially getting those pre-COVID baselines is something quite important. We're also using the Energy Star Portfolio Manager to collect data from participants. So there's an opportunity to sort of piggyback on the existing EWRB program. And as you can see on the right-hand side, that's a snapshot of sort of something we're looking to build towards, which is a map of Ottawa with individual buildings plotted on it and their energy performance. So you can probably guess that red is maybe not performing as well, and all the way up to green and blue are buildings that are performing better. And this is through some of the statistics that Trevor alluded to, which Energy Star Portfolio Manager spits out, things like GHG intensity and by square footage. So we're looking to make sure that these are sort of public metrics that become more of our collective collective vocabulary, collective consciousness as we move towards a low energy future, but also to make sure that folks can measure themselves up against other buildings in the Ottawa area who are experiencing the same sort of pulls and pushes from the market. So again, recognizing that this is another benchmarking program, it's potentially adding work to the plates of some folks in the building, in the building management sector and the property management sector. We are really just hoping to sort of run alongside EWRB for all intents and purposes. I mentioned that this is something we're using the same tools as EWRB. We're largely collecting the same data as EWRB. And so we're not looking for, to reinvent the wheel here with a whole different slew of participation hurdles. We are looking to just take the EWRB program a few steps further. So as I mentioned earlier, public disclosure, really a foundational piece to motivate action within the commercial, in particular within the commercial building sector, but also within the multi-unit residential sector. And the key piece here is that the data collected from this program will really go a long way towards the City of Ottawa's development of, be it financial support programs, be it, regulatory benchmarking or regulatory performance, standards. So we're looking to collect this data so that we have an accurate viewpoint of where buildings in Ottawa are at and what we can do as the city to support them to improve their energy performance and lower their greenhouse gas emissions. So why participate? So, we like to think that unlike the EWRB program, a very important program, and we're really glad to see the province, mandating it. But we want to recognize that you should get something out of participation in these programs. So in addition to the insights you can glean from your Energy Star portfolio manager reports, you'll also be getting an additional insights report that goes in even a little bit deeper on where opportunities within your building may lie for energy savings, for water use savings, and for energy efficiency and really comfort improvements in your building as well. We're working with our procurement team to sort of develop a program for subsidized thermal energy audits. So on the right-hand side there, you can see sort of a snapshot from what these audits provide. And folks may be familiar, in the room, I'm sure, with things like ASHRAE audits, which generally look at sort of the mechanical, the electrical systems of your property. Maybe they touch on your building envelope, but one of the things that the city has noticed in its research on this is that building envelopes is a bit of a blind spot for a lot of folks, and especially ways that building envelopes can be improved to support future retrofits of mechanical, of electrical systems as you go down the line. A lot of the research out there shows that starting with envelope is a really important point, because otherwise you're sort of, even if you're introducing a high efficiency heating system, you're still heating in a drafty or a less airtight building. We're also looking to sort of build a bit of a network, a bit of a knowledge sharing network of building operators and owners within the Ottawa area. And so, opening up the opportunity for capacity building workshops, that I've mentioned earlier. We're going to be looking at rolling out a series of webinars and potentially at some point in-person events that look at, sharing information about how benchmarking can be done, what you can glean from benchmarking results, but also how to take next steps after you've recorded your energy and water usage. And finally, I mentioned that the city is really taking a hard look right now at how we can financially support these kinds of deep energy retrofits, these kinds of emission reducing renovations. And one of the big things we think we can do is provide sort of commercial PACE programs, so property assessed clean energy programs, or something similar to that, that would allow folks to access low interest, long-term financing from the city directly. Similar to what we're offering to single family home owners right now through the Better Homes Ottawa Loan Program. We'd look to sort of port that over to the commercial sector as well, because we've seen that that's a really valuable sort of catalyst in folks taking on this kind of work. And finally, by participating in this program through the city, we think that folks will sort of set themselves, apart and demonstrate that commitment to energy transparency, demonstrate to the community, to their tenants, as the case may be, that they are, thinking about this kind of thing, that they're thinking about their, their overall environmental performance and their energy performance, and that they're, starting down the road of improving that as necessary. So that does it for me. Happy to answer any questions that folks may have. You can find more information about the program from the City of Ottawa on our website, ottawa.ca/betterbuildings. You can also contact us through the information on the screen. And I would be personally happy to talk through, questions and concerns, both either now or offline, about this program and about how you can get involved. So with that, I'll hand it back over to the folks over at Hydro Ottawa.
Yeah, thanks very much, Aaron. And certainly we appreciate the City of Ottawa being here and sharing some information about their programs, and are working together with them to really hope that people can focus on their energy consumption and yeah, start to benchmark their buildings. So we've certainly got some time for questions. Like I said, if you do have questions, please type them into the question box, and Sarah can read them out for us, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Great. Thank you very much, Trevor. And I want to thank everyone for participating today. I know there's been some really fantastic information that's been presented, especially for those who may be new to EWRB reporting. So thank you. But this is the time for you to go even deeper into the information that's been shared. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we have lots of time to answer your questions. And just so everyone is aware, when you are submitting your questions through this function, the questions, you will remain anonymous. Only the folks at Hydro Ottawa and the city can see those questions, so please be reassured that they won't be shared publicly, but we will share our responses out to everyone. And a quick note, after today's webinar, when you are logging off, there will be a quick 5-question survey for you to complete, and we would love to get your thoughts on the session to help us improve our future presentations as well. So with that, let's dive into the questions as they are really starting to fly in. One housekeeping note I will mention now, as a few people have asked whether the slides, the presentation, or the video will be shared after. The answer to all of those questions is yes. The slide deck that was shared today will be sent out to all participants, and we will also be posting the video to our respective websites, and so you can find the information or share the information video with either colleagues or other members in your community as well. So Trevor, let's start with you. I see there's, by the sounds of it, there's quite a few new people on the line or new to EWRB. And so for those who are submitting data for the very first time, what is the reporting time frame that they should be submitting their data for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reporting deadline is July 1st of each year. The ministry asks that you share your portfolio manager profile by July 1st. And again, so for the 2022 reporting year that we're currently in, you will be reporting on January to December data from 2021, so the previous calendar year. So you've got until July 1st to report that data. What I would suggest is not to wait too long. Keep in mind that if you're requesting data from Hydro Ottawa, for example, we do have a 6-week turnaround time, a maximum of 6-week turnaround time. And really, we see the bulk of requests come in kind of late April, May, and early June. So that reporting time gets a little bit longer then. So I'd encourage you to get your request in as early as possible if you are going to be requesting data from us.
Great, thanks. And Aaron, I'm actually going to flip it to you right away. There are some questions around the charges associated with data through the City of Ottawa. And so the question specifically with this program is whether the city will remove the fee for requesting aggregated consumption data.
Yeah, so I can speak certainly to the water data because that is the one that the city has the sort of direct control over. So I know we're working with our folks over at the city the water department to find ways to reduce those fee barriers to access data. Now I believe, and Trevor, you can jump in with fee structures for folks participating and requesting data from hydro. I believe for Enbridge, if you fall under the sort of mandated EWRB threshold, that those requests can be fulfilled free of charge. I believe for Enbridge, but what's the case for hydro, Trevor?
Yeah, great question. So hydro, if you're requesting data for EWRB through the program, through that website, it is free. Normally a data request from hydro, if you're asking us for data, it's a manual process and we do have a service charge for that. But for the purposes of EWRB, we are doing that for free. So EWRB data requests through Hydro Ottawa do not have a charge.
Yeah, and just to tack on to that, the city is looking into ways in which we might be able to, reduce or eliminate costs for folks who maybe fall in between that 20,000 to 100,000 square foot threshold. Of course, not covered by the EWRB threshold, but folks that we are encouraging participate. So we are looking into that further, and it's definitely something I would recommend folks follow up with on our website to learn a bit more about.
Aaron, I'm going to keep it with you for a moment, and this question is related to, the instituting the city program and how strategies or what this data will inform. So a two-part question here. You did talk about the use of the city data, or sorry, how the city will be using the data that's reported in this voluntary program. Are other municipalities instituting similar programs, and will organizations be able to benchmark by city?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. Certainly other municipalities are taking this up. Now, I believe Ottawa might be the first in Ontario doing this at a municipal level. I know we've looked closely at the programs out in the province of British Columbia, sort of does it provincially. Likewise, Calgary and Edmonton have very similar programs out in Alberta. But we are in active conversation with, municipalities of Toronto, Kingston, Guelph, and others to maybe develop some more form of a standardized approach. And of course, as I mentioned, part of our strategy is to continue those discussions with the province of Ontario to see if we can align ourselves more so with the various climate, plans that have been laid out by municipalities across the province. So short answer is there are similar programs across the country, and to an extent across the province, although the rollout of those may be somewhat delayed.
Great, thank you. Trevor, I'm going to throw it back to Hydro Ottawa's way. And this question is in regards to waste data. And so is entering waste data mandatory within data collection?
Yeah, great question. So you can enter waste data through Portfolio Manager. That's one of the metrics that you can track. It is not part of the EWRB regulation. EWRB is only looking at energy and water. So energy would be electricity, natural gas, if you use propane, if you use any other fuel sources in your building, and then your water data. So waste data is not mandatory, and the province does not track or publish that data. But if you want to use the Portfolio Manager tool to track your data and to benchmark, you can certainly do that.
Great, and actually, Trevor, this next question is for you as well. I know you can answer from a Hydro Ottawa perspective specifically, but the question is whether utilities provide aggregated consumption data for buildings who are not reporting to EWRB.
No, so the free data requests that we do is for the EWRB program and supporting the City of Ottawa's benchmarking program. So it has to be a request through the EWRB request form for those purposes, and we are only providing that monthly consumption number. If you need data other than that, so if you need a smaller interval, you want to see daily data or hourly data, or if you're using it for some other purpose, there is an administrative fee for that, because the process of pulling that data is a manual process.
Great, thank
And
you.
I can't speak. I know that question said something about utilities. I don't know about Enbridge, whether or not they charge for data requests outside of the EWRB request, but you can certainly reach out to them to ask that question.
Great. Erin, back over to you for a moment, if you don't mind. You talked about the data, how it will help inform future strategies within the city. And then on another note, you also talked about some of the retrofit funding opportunities that may be available. And so will the city use the data collected through this voluntary program to help inform some of those funding opportunities to help green our city?
Yeah, certainly. That's a huge part of where this data will be put to use. Not only on the sort of, as we like to say, on the sticks side of things, on the regulatory side of things, but equally on the incentive side of things, or on the support side of things. So the city is sort of actively looking at what kinds of say financial support programs. So maybe it's rebates, maybe it's long-term financing, as I mentioned. What kind of things will support the commercial building sector and the large residential sector to undertake deep energy retrofits. That's a huge part of where this data will be feeding into.
Great. Trevor, back over to you. And sorry, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but it's just as the questions are coming in. A number of buildings, Trevor, as you know, have backup generator systems, or maybe even producing their own power in some cases. And so how do building managers report either on-site generation or backup generation power?
Yeah, great question. So backup generation, if it's only used for emergency backup, does not need to be reported through this program or through the portfolio manager tool. That's considered a unique one-off case. If you have on-site generation, there is a mechanism in portfolio manager to add that in as a utility meter essentially, and record your consumption. And there is a pretty handy help guide through portfolio manager that outlines how to go about doing that. And you can put in the fuel source, whether it's a renewable generation source like solar PV, or a combined heat and power source that uses maybe natural gas as a fuel. There is a mechanism to put that in portfolio manager, and I would just direct you to the help guide for portfolio manager in terms of how to go about doing that.
Great, and you did mention in the presentation the tools that are available to folks, and so when we share the presentation and the links again, we would encourage you to take advantage of what's available to you. Even if you're in the deciding processes as to whether to institute these reporting mechanisms within your own organizations, whether from a voluntary perspective or obviously, I guess not much of a choice from a mandated or regulated perspective, but there's lots of guidance and help there to help people along.
Exactly.
We do have time, folks, for a few more questions if there are any. But in the meantime, Trevor or Erin, do either of you have any final comments for those who have joined us today?
Yeah, I think maybe just an encouragement to look at this program as an opportunity to really dive into and understand energy use in your building. It can be a little daunting or a little frustrating to look at a regulation that requires you to do something, but really this is a great opportunity to understand energy consumption in your building. And as I think both Erin and I mentioned, that's the first step in terms of getting a handle and looking to reduce your consumption. So just encourage you to do that. Reach out to us if you need support, either on the sort of data side of things, or if you're looking for more dedicated support on getting a handle on your energy consumption in your building.
And I would just echo that. Trevor summed it up beautifully there. But yeah, you know, the old mantra, you can't reduce, in this case, what you don't measure. So, you know, start with this, you know, help yourself establish a baseline and figure out where it is you need to go. And, you know, Trevor mentioned things like anomalies. This is a great way to catch those kinds of things, figure out where you might be able to tighten things up in your building. And likewise, the city is here, you know, stepping into this space, maybe for the sort of in a meaningful way for the first time, to sort of support folks and you know, the private sector through this journey. So feel free to reach out with us with any questions on that matter.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Seeing that there are no other questions, folks, when we do share the presentations, both Aaron's contact information and Trevor's contact information is within the deck. So this doesn't mean that it's the end of the conversation. We encourage you to keep it going, reach out, ask questions, and get involved. So on behalf of Hydro Ottawa and the City of Ottawa, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. If you can complete the survey, it would be greatly appreciated, and we will share the information as soon as it becomes available. Thank you very much, folks, and take care and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.